Okay, I think we should start. There's still some people joining, so we can do maybe introductions in the interim. So welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Daneshri Mudli. I'm the customer consultant for Elsevier. I am based in South Africa and I work with ScienceDirect, Scopus and Mendeley customers that are based in Sub-Saharan Africa. The Researcher Toolbox webinar series has fast grown in our region, and the topics discussed have been really helpful and useful to the research community. We always welcome your feedback, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. I have personally received a lot of requests for the recording of this webinar series. Just wanted to let you know that I am working on a platform that will host all of the webinars, and you are going to receive a link to this platform to the email address that you use to register for the webinar series. You can feel free to reuse the recordings. If you want to share it with your colleagues, please feel free to do so. But you will most likely receive all of these links after the webinar series has concluded. So I would like to introduce our speaker today. We're going to be discussing in today's webinar a very highly requested topic, which deals with the Scopus author profiles. Should you have any questions or comments before I hand over to the speaker, please remember to put them into the Q&A box. The Q&A box is moderated by Lucia Scumbi, who is a senior research intelligence consultant, myself, Daneshri, as well as John Sturley, account manager for South Africa, and Sharif Ghazi, account manager for Sub-Saharan Africa. It's my pleasure to introduce Isabel to you today. Isabel is based in London and is a senior product manager. She works specifically with both author and institutional profiles, and she will be taking us through key topics related to Scopus author profiles today. So Isabel, I'm going to hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Daneshri, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you all today. Oh, so what do we have in store for us today? So I'm going to start off with an introduction to who I am and the Scopus product team. Then I'm going to explain why author profiles are really valuable and how they can help you, and give you tips to make the most of them, covering the basics like submitting corrections and understanding the different metrics, looking at some of the analysis tools, and also how you can keep track of profiles. And we'll make sure to leave some time for questions, and you can pop them in the Q&A at any time. So do enter them as we go along. So I wanted to take a minute to introduce myself properly. So I'm Isabel, and I'm one of 5 product managers on the Scopus team. So the product managers work alongside a wider team of engineers, designers, data experts, our marketing, sales, and customer support colleagues. And we all work to make sure Scopus can help the research community with their important tasks. I'm based in London, and I joined Scopus in September last year, coming from a background working in strategy. I'm still learning a lot from customers and users like yourselves, and love to hear feedback about how we can make Scopus even better at supporting the research community. I'm really excited to be here speaking with you today, and looking forward to sharing some tips on the author profile. So I know we might have a bit of a mixed audience today across the 146 of us. So I wanted to start by giving a brief reminder about what Scopus is for any of you who might be less familiar. So Scopus is a source-neutral abstract and citation database. It covers 81 million items, including records from journals, books and book series, conference proceedings, and trade publications across 17 million author profiles and 80,000 institutional or affiliation profiles. It delivers a comprehensive view of the world of research and has tools and functionalities on our platform to support you to track and analyze and visualize research data from 7,000 different publishers. All of this comes together to power your research and to help you stay abreast with current publications, analyze journals to publish in, track and monitor global trends, find collaborators, and more. So today I'll be focusing on author profiles. So what's an author profile? Well, an author profile is a representation of an author and their work gathered under a unique Scopus author ID number. Our profiles include identifiers, so the Scopus author ID, and information about the author's output or portfolio of publications, along with metrics which help track citations of output and more. Hopefully the page that I'm showing on the screen now is familiar to some of you. So why are author profiles useful? So for researchers, author profiles are an opportunity to showcase your work. You can send signals to the research community, encouraging others to read and engage with your work, or perhaps consider you as a collaborator, really showing off the impact that you're having. On the other side, they're used by different stakeholders for evaluation. For example, research staff can use them to help them with decisions about hiring, or who to promote, or when putting together teams. Funders can use them to help allocate grant money. And other researchers can dig into author profiles to help them decide who they might want to network or collaborate with, whose research should they read, or somebody if they need a reviewer for a journal. As you can see, they're both important to showcase your important work and for evaluation. So I wanted to talk you through how Scopus author profiles are created. So our author profiles are built from the bottom up, and they're based on Scopus documents. So our author profiles are clusters of all the author information and publications belonging to the researcher. And our institution profiles are actually built in a similar way. One big challenge that we face is author disambiguation. So this slide will hopefully bring it to life a bit for you. So the first point is there are lots of authors who have similar names, but are actually different people. For example, how can you tell the difference between 3 authors who are different people, but all call themselves Dr. Smith when they publish? And then imagine if these Dr. Smiths actually publish in the same subject area, or even at the same institution or department. It's pretty hard to tell them apart. The second challenge is when you think about a single author, sometimes they choose to publish under similar but slightly different name variations. So in this example, we're taking Dr. Stone. So she might use variations of her name when she publishes in different journals with different requirements. So many journals actually just require the first initial, which makes disambiguation even harder. And I know we'll have lots of scientists on the call who like data. So let's bring some data to this. Out of 270 million author bylines that we capture in Scopus, 60% have just the first initial. So now you get a sense of what we're dealing with, trying to find publications all from one single author. And then what about if Dr. Stone gets married and starts publishing under her married name and now calls herself Dr. Jane Ashby? How do we make sure we capture all of those publications and link them up to the right profile? And lastly, authors don't always make it easy for us. Sometimes they publish with variations in the affiliation name. So there might be slight differences in spelling or the way the name's written. And we have to work through this to intelligently match the publications and affiliations and create strong profiles. And that's why we need clever technology and user feedback to do this. So we address these challenges by using a powerful algorithm and user feedback to create our profiles. The algorithm groups papers to a profile with a high degree of accuracy based on matching the name, affiliation, subject area, citations, and co-authors. It benefits from accurate citation links and institution profiles that we have in Scopus. Due to the complexity around author disambiguation that I just talked you through, the algorithm alone may not be perfect, especially in tricky cases. For example, when somebody's got married and changed their name, or if someone's moved into a new subject field. So we also offer the opportunity for authors to request manual corrections and updates to their profile. We'll talk you through this in a bit more detail later, giving you some tips about how to do this. But this, together with our powerful algorithm and our feedback from users like you, help us build really accurate profiles. And because of the accuracy and quality of our profiles, lots of organizations, government, and funders rely on Scopus data and our profiles to make research decisions. So with an example that's relevant to your region, in South Africa, for example, the National Research Foundation uses Scopus as one of its tools to evaluate authors. But as you can see, there are many more examples across the world. So now I want to share some tips to help support you in your needs to showcase performance or evaluate other researchers using author profiles. So firstly, I want to talk about navigating to author profiles. So how do you get there? Well, you can find an author profile by going to the Authors tab on the homepage. Here, you can search by name, and you enter the last name of the author, which is required. And you can also enter a first name or initials. And you can add an affiliation to further narrow down your results. On this same tab, you can also search by ORCID ID. On the right-hand side, this is a different way of searching, and this is via an advanced search. So if you wanted to do a search on the advanced search, this would then lead you to, by author ID, you'll get to a list of documents by this author. In Scopus, all of the data is linked. So then, from your advanced search for documents by an author ID, you can then get to our author profiles from the results page by clicking on this column, which hopefully my cursor is highlighting now, or by clicking on this filter on the left-hand side. So as you can see, get to the author profiles from the homepage, or you can do a document search with an author ID and pick off authors from our linked database. So now I'm looking at your profiles. So this is the author page that you arrive at, which gives an overview of their author and their metrics at the top. So here you can see your preferred name, options to connect an ORCID ID, which is an identifier that you can link up with your Scopus author profile. You'll also see your affiliation, and you can click to see more of your affiliation history and subject areas. Down here, if you see anything that is wrong with your profile or a paper that's missing, you can request to make edits. Over here, you can also add alerts for when a document by this author is added or they receive citations, and you can look at potential author matches. And lastly, you can export to our partner analytics product, SciVal. Down here, you can get easy access to documents, citations, and also co-authors and areas of expertise. So now onto affiliations. So affiliations in Scopus are the connection between authors and institutions. They're extracted from published documents. So they show the institution the author was affiliated with when they published a document. Current affiliation is based on the most recent publication, and so could be different from your current employment. You can see the full affiliation history by clicking Show All Author Info, which is highlighted. And this shows the full affiliation history with the year range when an author was writing from a specific institution. This is pulled up down here. If the affiliation is wrong, you can request a change by clicking Edit Profile over here. And with the affiliation, you can choose from any of the previous affiliations that are listed for you. Now I want to talk about an important topic, which is requesting corrections to a profile. So if something doesn't look right on your profile, you can request a correction. So this is the main place to do it, where it says Edit Profile towards the top of your profile on your author profile page. You can also go directly to this link, which we can provide you with after. So what kind of changes can you make? Well, once you've clicked Edit Profile, you can make a number of changes. You can ask to override the preferred name or current affiliation. You can remove content. So any content that is misassigned and actually doesn't belong to your profile, you can request to remove it. You can also look for missing content and ask for content to be linked to your profile. But note that this has to be content that's covered within the Scopus content selection policy, and it's got to be from one of the sources that are indexed in Scopus. And lastly, you can give feedback on new content types. Here, part of this series is also spoken about preprints, which are one of the new content types on the author profile page in Scopus. And as you can see here, you can request give feedback on them. Finally, the last correction you can request is merges, which are when you combine two or more author profiles. You can do this on the profile itself by clicking here on potential author matches. It's a really good idea to have a look at these and see if there's another profile that should actually be merged with yours. You can also do it from the author search results after you've searched from an author by name. And this can be really useful because then you can see them when you've done a search and you can merge them if they actually are the same person. So with all of these corrections, you can request them on your own profile or on behalf of someone else. At some universities, librarians might help you edit your profile. Once the corrections have been received, our team verify them and then they'll appear on your profile. And it's also good to know that those of you even that don't have subscriptions or aren't from universities with subscriptions can also request corrections. So now I want to talk to you about our author profile metrics and analysis tools. These are important to understand to showcase your impact or assess other researchers or maybe choose a suitable peer reviewer. So the author profile page has a number of features to help you analyze an author's performance. As highlighted here, you can see total documents and citations over time, as well as H-index. We've also developed some additional tools to help you analyze performance. So there's the H-index graph down here, analyze author output over here, and citation overview tracker over here. I'm going to dig into each of these. So first, I want to talk about H-index. The goal of H-index is to measure an author's scholarly impact in a way that recognizes both the quality and quantity of research. The H-index meets both criteria, and to better understand this metric, I wanted to take you through how it's calculated. So it's calculated by listing out an author's publications, sorted from the most cited at the top to the least cited at the bottom. So in this example, this author has 12 publications and her top publication is about COVID and it's got 99 citations. Then, to calculate H-index, you work down this list to find the paper whose rank is closest to its number of citations. So you're working down like this, and in this case, I'm getting to the 8th paper. So this author has 8 papers which have been cited more than 8 times. We will carry on going down the list, we'll get to the 9th paper, but the 9th paper has only been cited 7 times, and so it's below our cutoff. This author's H-index is 8, because they have 8 papers, all of these, that have been cited more than 8 times. On the right-hand side, you can see the Scopus H-index graph, which does the same calculation for you. So on the Scopus graph, an author's publishing history is mapped out with their highest citations on the left. So over here are the papers with the highest citations, and then less citations down here. And then again, in a similar way as I just explained, we look for the highest number of papers that have had at least the same number of citations. So we're working down this. And what we've already calculated for you is that in this case, it's 38. So this author, much the same, has 38 papers cited more than 38 times. So there are some benefits to H-index. Compared with looking just at citations, with H-index, we won't overvalue scholars who had one superstar publication with thousands of citations that never published again. We also don't overvalue scholars who published hundreds of papers that got no citations. But there are some limitations it's important to be aware of. So firstly, H-index is greatly affected by time. A young researcher could have made a big contribution to the field, but her publications have not had time to accumulate citations yet. And even after a researcher dies, their H-index continues to grow as the published work continues collecting citations. H-index also varies a lot across fields, so it can't be compared across disciplines. So to bring that to life a bit, in medicine and chemistry, publications tend to be shorter and more frequent and have more co-authors. The median H-index for established authors in medical sciences and chemistry is 90, whereas in economics and management, it's 15, where publications tend to take longer and have fewer co-authors. Lastly, H-index doesn't take into account if you published your work alone or as the first or last author, nor an author's total number of citations. So I promised to talk about some of the other author metrics and tools. So first, analyze author output. So this is a collection of in-depth and visual analysis tools designed to give you a better picture of an author's publication history and influence. So it could be useful if you wanted to showcase your experience in a particular field or find a collaborator with a particular focus, or compare two candidates. You can see the output by subject area. You can also see it by year or by type, for example, review paper versus editorial. And we have 2 more panels with the author's citations and co-authors. And you can export these visualizations or email them. The next tool I wanted to talk to you about is the citation overview tracker. So this is an adjustable graph and table that includes the number of times each document has been cited per publication year. So this can be useful to understand the impact of an author's work. And you can also update it to exclude self-citations or exclude citations from books. So that can be super useful. The next interesting feature that you can use for analysis is topics. So firstly, let me give you a bit of background on topics, which are created by our partner product, SciVal. A topic is a collection of documents with a common focused intellectual interest. So they're based on clustering the citation network of Scopus content. So there are nearly 96,000 global unique research topics which have been created based on citation patterns. Topics are dynamic, and over time they will evolve and new topics will emerge and old topics might become dormant. So how can you actually use these in Scopus? Well, in Scopus, you can see the top 3 most contributed topics at the top of the page on the topics tab. So they're over here, which I'm highlighting here, and on the topics tab, which is over here. So you can see the top topics over here, and then the full list of the topics an author contributed to down here. And you can also see the number of documents an author's contributed and the field-weighted citation impact. This can be useful to give an indication of what kind of topics an author works in and how they're contributing to this area. Also, if you click on a specific topic, you get to open up a panel which will give you a flavor for representative documents in a topic. So what kind of research do they actually include? And you'll also get to see top authors in this topic and key phrase analysis about the author's documents in this topic. You can also go out to our partner product, Scival, for more analytics on this. So now I want to talk to you about our author profile metrics and analysis tools. So these are important to understand to showcase your impact or assess other researchers or choose a suitable peer reviewer. So logged in users can set alerts, and this can be done from the author profile page. So as shown over here, you can click set alert, or you can click set document alert. Then you can request author notifications when new documents by the author appear in Scopus, or if their work gets new citations. So it's really useful to keep track. Another thing that may be useful is creating lists of authors. So you can create a targeted list for future projects, for example, or if you wanted to follow a particular research group, or maybe there are a group of researchers in a particular subject area that you're interested in. So you might want to find some profiles and add them all to a list. Authors can be added to a list from the author profile results page, which is this first one that I'm showing over here. You could also add them to a list from the author profile page over here, clicking Save to List. You could also add authors to a list from looking from co-authors. So maybe you've gone on the co-authors tab and you've opened your full list of co-authors and you're looking at them here. And you can also add them to a list from potential author matches. So different ways to put authors on a list to keep track of them. And then once you've made a list of authors that are interested, how do you get to it? Well, this is where lists are kept. So once you've made a list of authors, it can be useful to click here and go and look at your saved lists. So I've run through lots of different ways you can get the most of the author profile today and lots of tips. And I wanted to point you in the direction of some additional resources where you can find more information. So you can find some more information if you connect with us on the Scopus blog, or if you subscribe to the newsletter, or via Twitter. And we have a series of guides to help you ace your Scopus author profile. And you can download these one-pagers that will give you some information and remind you of the steps you should be taking on author profiles and give you some extra information about how they're built. And we'll make sure that we share this after. I think the final thing that I wanted to do is to talk to you quickly about new things that we've recently added to the Scopus author profiles and give you a heads up on what's coming up. So on new things, one thing I wanted to flag to this group was something we recently added to Scopus. So we recently added preprints. So what are preprints? Well, preprints are a version of a scholarly paper that comes before publication in a peer-reviewed journal. And they can be described as ongoing research. So why are they interesting? Well, preprints can help assess if other researchers are doing cutting edge work. Are they doing innovative research? Maybe these researchers could be really good potential collaboration partners. Maybe you might want to exchange ideas with them. It can also help you to read or assess another researcher's most recent work. Lastly, they can help widen the opportunity for getting comments on your work, which might help you get to a better final product. And funders also like to use them to assess funding applications. So they've been added to Scopus on this tab over here. And then if you click on preprints, you get to open this page here, which gives you detail on the record. Initially, they won't be added into author metrics and citations, and they're clearly separated from peer-reviewed content. Lastly, they'll only be made available for authors that already have a profile in Scopus. So hopefully, this is an exciting new development. I also wanted to talk about a development that we're looking at bringing soon to Scopus. And when we say soon, relatively soon. So one idea that we're thinking about at the moment has been around network building and collaboration. And we know this can be really important, especially in the world today where research can be increasingly cross-discipline and cross-border. And you need to forge connections across different fields, but also into non-academic sectors. But we also hear from talking with researchers like yourselves that there are challenges around this. So if you don't have a network already in these areas, and it can also be time consuming along with all the difficult research that you're doing to find suitable individuals and to make informed connections. So we're looking at what we can do to help our researchers to build connections and looking at how we can help visualize networks or help you search directly through to finding researchers to better find other people in your field and to collaborate with them. So I think that's brought me to the end of what I wanted to talk through with you today. Hopefully what I've shared have been some broader understanding about why author profiles are important, how we actually build them on Scopus, and some tips and tricks to help you to make the most of them. So thank you very much for listening. And I think we always appreciate hearing feedback from customers and users. And so definitely excited to answer some questions if we can.
Thank you, Isabel. I think that your presentation was really well delivered and I really enjoyed it as well. We did receive some questions in Q&A. Just two basically. But before I address the questions, I received a lot of comments again asking for a recording of your presentation. So I just wanted to tell the audience that you will receive the recording. We are having one final session in the series on the 11th of November. And I do encourage everyone to attend that as well. That is, I'm putting the details into chat. It's the responsible use of metrics, a Scopus perspective that is going to be on the 11th of November. And it's also something that is going to cover a topic that's well requested by researchers. So please try and attend. After this final session in the series, we will send the recordings of all 4 of the sessions. It will be sent to the email address that you used to register for this webinar series. If you do have any questions, we still have some time, so please feel free to type it into the Q&A box. I have reopened the chat box as well. It was just during the session we stopped the chat because we did not want it to be distracting to our presenter. So if you have any comments, you can put it in chat. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box because that is where we're going to be looking right now to look for your questions. So Isabel, the first question is on alt metrics. Are you able to pull them for each individual author or is it per publication?
Sure, so that's a really great question. So you might have seen that on the Scopus documents, we have Plumex metrics, and this covers things like citations that are from policy documents, clinical citations. It covers things like captures. It covers different kind of views, so you can see engagement with the metrics. And currently, these are on our document details page. We are looking at rolling them up and adding them to the author profile page, so that then, rather than just having these alternative metrics on the document page, we would roll them up to the author. And this is something that we think could be interesting to provide a broader view of the impact of a researcher. And we hear that things like those alternative social media metrics, so how much is a researcher's work being tweeted about, for example, we hear that that could be quite interesting. We're still discussing this with our users so that we can understand exactly how much demand is there for them, and also which of those alternative metrics are most interesting. So we'd also certainly love to get more feedback. If there are users or customers with a particular interest in this, definitely feel free to reach out to me or Daneshri, and we'd love to chat with you a bit more about that, because it's certainly something we're looking at, but we're also trying to balance it against some of the other exciting ideas that we want to bring to you in 2022.
Thank you, Isabel. The next question is, how can you move papers listed under secondary documents into your main documents?
Yeah, so secondary documents, you can't really move them, and it's about the content policy of Scopus. So secondary documents are for things that aren't inside the core content collection from Scopus. So our content selection is defined by a board of real experts who we call the Content Selection Advisory Board. And this board defines what the Scopus world of publications are. And it's this set that kind of appear in documents, whereas secondary documents are other documents that are outside this, but might be citing documents. What I think could be useful on this point as well is in another session, perhaps giving some more detail about our content selection process and how documents end up in the core content collection. And there's also some material that we can share about this for those of you who might be interested, and we can make sure that's included when we send around the webinar.
Thanks, Isabel. Next question is, beside Elsevier, are there any other journals that are managed or indexed by Scopus?
Absolutely. So Scopus is publisher neutral. So it's not just Elsevier journals. And I want to make that really clear. So as well as the Elsevier journals, which we cover, we also cover journals by Springer Nature. We also cover Wiley journals. We also cover journals from a range of societies. So Scopus is really publisher neutral. And as I mentioned before, there are 7,000 publishers that we're pulling content from. So it's definitely not just Elsevier content. And we're really proud on Scopus to emphasize that we're publisher neutral. So we don't give a preference to Elsevier journals or Elsevier content. And the content's really assessed by this independent panel. And so there's not a preference. And so it is really publisher neutral across all of the publishers. And the criteria to decide which journals are accepted are based on rigorous evaluation about the sort of research going on in this journal, as well as some basic criteria for inclusion. For example, us being able to index and having English language metadata, which is a requirement for our technology to index the publications and link them up to profiles, for example.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, does Scopus work across other tools like ResearchGate and academia.edu? How will my each index be affected in Scopus if my research has been viewed through ResearchGate, for example?
Sure. So does Scopus work across? So I guess there are different views on a profile. So ResearchGate, for example, has their own profiles, and you can create them and link in some publications, but they're very much more generated by the community. And that's quite different from the way that Scopus publications are created from all of this database that we've collected together, and we create them automatically with our algorithm and user feedback. They're automatically updated. And that's quite different to how ResearchGate profiles are created, for example. In terms of whether Scopus works with other products, I mean, when we look at some of our metrics on Scopus, for example, by the fact that we are tracking views tracked on Scopus, some of our metrics refer to use of your article on Scopus, whereas others, if we're talking about citations, they're very much cross-platform. So if a citation is received from a journal elsewhere, that certainly will show up in your Scopus metrics, and that will be reflected.
Thank you. I see that some of the questions are related to publishing. So if your question is about publishing a document, we do have webinars available covering the article publishing process. It's available on our YouTube channel called Elsevier Africa. You will find 2 parts of this webinar series. It is the article publishing process part 1 and 2. And it will be included in the links that I share at the end of the series. So this is the reason why we're sending one email at the end of the series, because we've had a lot of webinars this year, and we did receive feedback that people want the recordings, but they're finding some on YouTube and some on different platforms. So we're trying to put it all together and share the list with you. So you will also receive the author workshop recordings, even though it was outside of this webinar series. The next question is, are you linked to ORCID?
Yeah, so a great question. So on the author profile, I can show you here, might be helpful. You can bring up a profile over here. You can click connect to ORCID. And then this means that you can, as it says, associate your Scopus author profile with your ORCID ID. So clicking here at the top of the page means that you can make that link. We're also looking at ways to leverage the ORCID profiles to help make Scopus even better, tackling some of those disambiguation challenges that I talked you through before. So we're looking at how we can get an automated feed from ORCID, which can help us pick apart those difficult questions of, is this the same author or not? So we're working through that at the moment, but yeah, you can certainly link your ORCID profile with your Scopus profile, as I just showed you. And once it is linked, you'll then see it on your Scopus profile as well. So that link will change from connect to ORCID, and it will tell you that you've already done that.
Perfect. The next 2 questions, I'm going to read them out, but it's based on the same concept. The first one is, my H index in Scopus is 7, while ResearchGate is 14. Does it mean some journals are not recognized by Scopus? Followed by, most School of Art academics have struggled to get the H index. Is it because they are not publishing on Elsevier or Wiley, but we could find it on Google Scholar? So basically, the question is, why does the H index differ on Scopus to other platforms?
Yeah, a good question. And so it's largely around the content differences, because Scopus is based on this curated set of content where all of the titles have been reviewed, and then we've decided what's included based on expert input, and to build a really rigorous, high quality but curated data set. And this is why Scopus is used in evaluations, because people really trust the data set that's been created. But of course, if you look at other platforms which have a different data set, if you imagine that example where I walked through the H index, imagine that a different platform, then this author then actually has 20 documents and they've tracked more citations on them, then that will lead to a different H index. So it's largely around the content coverage, which can lead to really different H indexes. And I think it's also important to share the kind of view on responsible use of metrics, which I know many of you will hear about in the later series. from our metrics expert. But I think it's worth saying there are some flaws with H-index, and we recommend Elsevier using a basket of metrics to understand your own performance or to compare the performance of your peers. And we really subscribe to digging into the portfolio of work of an author and using several metrics to understand an author's impact, rather than just relying on one, like H-index.
Okay, that's clear. This question, I know you did cover this during your presentation, but the person asks if via a Scopus author profile, does it give room to understand other related disciplines written by the author? So I'm not sure if you would be okay with resharing that one slide where you demonstrated the output by subject area and how that connects to discovering more content from the author.
Yeah, sure. Let me bring that up. It's always good to have some good questions on it. So in terms of ways to think about information from an author and their subject area, so this can be quite useful. So this is an author profile, which I brought up. And over here, you've got your topics, which I talked about. So this is an author called Jennifer Doudna. I think she won a Nobel Prize, so I like her as an example. And here are some topics that she's contributed to. So you can get a flavor that she's doing some stuff around RNA, and I'm sure much cleverer people than me on the call maybe know what some of these things are. So you can see some information about topics. And if you wanted to click on one of the topics, you get a bit more information about them. So hopefully, whoa. Well, often, maybe if it's not, if my demo account's not working, by clicking on these topics, you can get more information about them. I seem to be having a glitch on mine today, but what we then get is that these topics then can be used in SciVal to explore. You can have a look at what the other authors are publishing in these topics. You can look at who else is in this topic, what is the author published on it. And that's one good way to get a view of what an author is contributing. And the reason we like topics are that they assign the documents at the document level, because sometimes we find that with journal subject level classifications, they can be quite broad, because a journal can cover loads of different things, whereas these can be quite granular and so provide a nice view of topics. So with this author, we're getting a sense that these two topics are the ones that she publishes in the most. But I guess she's done a bit of stuff in these other areas. So that can be quite interesting as a way to dig into subject areas at the topic level. Or the other thing that is on subject areas that is good to show is this bit at the top here. So if you want to get a really kind of high level view of what does this author publish in terms of subject areas, these subject areas over here give that sort of broader view. And this is based on looking at the journals that this author's published in. So you can see there's a lot kind of biochemistry, which makes sense. It's also published in some other journals, which are linked with other subject areas. So those are the two bits I'd go to get a flavor of which subject areas they work on. I'm sorry that my demo of topics hasn't worked so well. Hopefully another day, but that's definitely worth checking out and having a look at.
No problem, thank you. The last question is, how long does it take for Scopus to add a journal to an author's profile after publication? Because once I published a paper, that took Scopus around a year to add it to my profile.
Oh gosh, that doesn't sound good. So I appreciate how the challenge is and how once you publish, you really want it on your profile sooner so that you can start sharing it with the community and it can be having an impact on your metrics. So in terms of whether how quickly it happens, it often depends on the publisher. So content flows into Scopus at a different rate from different publishers. So we index the content as it comes in, but there really can be a variety. So the smaller publishers tend to feed the content into Scopus more slowly, whereas some of the bigger publishers might feed it in more quickly. And it's actually surprising that some publishers, like just a few, we've ended up still getting kind of paper records that then we have to translate and digitize. So it depends on the publisher. But once the contents come into Scopus and it's being indexed in our database, then we create profiles really regularly. So it takes a couple of days to be saying, okay, we've got this article and which author does it link up to? So it only takes a couple of days really to make that link. And that's pretty quick. And then if we've noticed something's wrong, then it can take, if you then submit a correction by the author feedback wizard, because the article didn't automatically end up on your profile, we say it's kind of, we hope to take around 7 days for automatic corrections, but it may be longer if there's a manual person involved in the loop. But it sounds like in that instance, something went a bit wrong, or that publisher provided the information really slowly. So I'm sorry about that. And that's definitely, we strive to get it in really as quickly as we can, bearing in mind how long it takes from the publisher and then linking it up as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Isabel. We again received a question about why the H-index is different to other platforms. So let me also just add, or perhaps just speak a bit more on the points that you have already said. So what's important and what Isabel has mentioned is that Scopus indexes journals that have undergone selection criteria in order for those journals to be available on Scopus. So whatever is indexed under an author's profile would be essentially coming from one of those journals, which is why the H-index can differ on other platforms to Scopus because of the content that's available on Scopus. But why Scopus is a trusted database is because of this strict, rigorous evaluation of the journals and to make sure that they meet a minimum selection criteria. So it is going to be different in that not all journals are indexed in Scopus, only the journals that would have met this criteria would be available on Scopus. That is why it's different. And remembering that Scopus is indexing peer-reviewed content, different to other platforms. Okay, hope that answers the question. There are no further questions in Q&A. So, but a lot of comments coming through and compliments for your presentation, Isabel. So I just wanted to say thank you as well for doing this. Definitely will be well received in our region, and we really appreciate you taking the time to explain all of these concepts to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening and the questions. A really great chance to speak to the community.
Okay, I think I'm going to close the session with that. And thanks everyone for joining us. And please be sure to join us in the last session for the series, which is, remember, on the 11th of November, and it's covering the responsible use of metrics. Okay, have a wonderful day, everyone.